Hey everybody, Michael Moses here at XPO Game Festival, and I'm joined today with Michael. Thankfully, that's his name because that's way easier to remember. And he's going to talk to us today a little VR game called Blasters of the Universe VR Bullet Hell. And honestly, the best part is VR Bullet Hell because I am a fan of the bullet hell genre,
Oh yeah,
and to see it hit the VR,
yeah,
that sounds crazy.
yeah.
So, where did Blasters of the Universe? Where did the idea for it come from?
So we've always been a big fan of bullet hell games, and we were sort of thinking about how that could be translated into this sort of room scale VR experience that's so powerful. So we kind of treat your head like the ship in a traditional bullet hell game, and then we sort of expand the patterns into 3D. So you get like big long tubes of bullets coming at you, and it's all about that sort of physical movement in VR. So you duck and dodge and move around as bullets all fly around you.
So, how do you translate something like the bullet hell, which is usually a 2.5-ish genre, and expand it into a full 3D and add in VR?
Yeah, so it was an interesting experience for us trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. We ended up sort of restricting the play space where the enemies attack at you from for like mostly 180 degrees. So at any moment you can kind of look left, look right, and sort of see what patterns and bullets are coming at you. And then sort of like balancing the patterns so they're complex enough that you get some really interesting shapes that you love to see in a bullet hell game, but still making it possible for the player to physically navigate through them with their head and body in VR.
So, one of the things about bullet hell that makes them so interesting are the giant bosses.
Yeah.
Getting through just the main mission itself is great,
Yeah.
but then you have the boss who takes up 1/3
Yeah.
of the screen to the right. How do you translate something that massive into VR, but still keep
Yeah.
the space into the 180 that you wanted to gain with the VR?
Yeah, I mean, in VR, it's actually a perfect translation because you have that sense of space and presence in VR so well. So we have like a 4-level campaign, each with a giant boss battle, and like when I say giant, I mean like giant. Like they come up and they're like in your face, like huge. It's funny seeing people play. The boss comes up to them and they're like, oh, they like take a step back because it's like you feel like a building is looming over top of you.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So, power-ups. How do they work? Since players are kind of restricted to how fast they have to move.
Yeah, yeah.
Picking up power-ups, is it something that's automatic, or is it still the classic find it, pick it up, and you're able to use it?
So the way we handle power-ups is that every frame of the gun has a special power-up. Those build up over time. So as you kill enemies and sort of rack up a higher score, your like special meter fills up, and then you get to unleash your power-up. So every frame has a different one that sort of suits your individual playstyle. Some are like it fires a barrage of missiles that like seek out all the enemies and blow them up. Some of them slow down time for so you have like all these slow motion, like, you know, Matrix style like bullets coming past you. One's a big laser that just like is like a death ray, just destroys everything in its path. Yeah.
So what headset will this actually be available on?
It's out right now on the Oculus Rift and on the HTC Vive, on Steam and on Oculus Home. We're working on the PlayStation VR port, and we're hoping to have it out as soon as possible. And it's $14.99.
So for PlayStation VR, since the movement is different from the cameras that you use with Vive and with the Oculus, is the controller going to be different for that, since you have the PlayStation controller compared to the touch and being able to move 360 degrees?
Yeah, so like when we were designing the game, we really tried to focus on making it as simple as possible in its implementation. So it's really just a trigger to shoot, a trigger to bring up a shield, and one button on the face of the controllers. Luckily, that's on all the major platforms. And when we originally started making the game, we were working with the early Vive development kits. and like stuff was 360 degrees, and it was just too chaotic. It's kind of a happy accident that having sort of narrowed the field of play a little bit, it actually works really well on PlayStation because they only have that single camera in the front. So you can still like step left, step right, sort of move around on the PlayStation, and it still works quite well.
Okay. So one of the few things that a lot of people actually talk about is transitioning when it comes to VR systems from the Vive and the Rift, which they work on PC, so you have a general idea.
Yeah.
But switching it over to something like PlayStation VR, where the hardware is vastly different,
Yeah.
but it's also focused because you know what's inside of PlayStation VR,
Yeah.
rather than a PC where you have to worry about certain CPUs and GPUs.
Yeah.
How does porting your game over to PlayStation VR fare?
It's been a bit of a challenge just because of the performance requirements that you need to make on the PlayStation, and especially because we have so many bullets. It's just like that can become a bit of an issue. But for the most part, we just had to like simplify a little bit of lighting, simplify a little bit of the shadows and stuff like that, and mostly it works good. Okay. The game's built in Unity, so it makes it fairly easy to sort of make those changes per platform.
One important thing is frame rate, of course.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when it comes to the PlayStation VR, they worry about frame rate taking a dip compared to the more graphically powerhouse of PCs.
Yeah.
Have you ran into any troubles when it comes to framework, when it comes to frames with the PlayStation VR?
Not really. We just have to like optimize really well and test and test and test to really make sure that we're always hitting that required frame rate. And that just it's part of the reason why we're still working on the PlayStation version, because that kind of optimization and iteration just takes time. Yeah. All
right, so here you go. Blasters of the Universe VR Bullet Hell is out now on Oculus Rift and, of course, on the HTC Vive, and it's coming soon to the PlayStation VR, hopefully by the end of this year.
I really hope so.
Well, it's great to have a timeline.
Yeah.
And you said it's $14.99 right now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try it out because it looks fun, and I love bullet hells.
Definitely.
Mike, thanks for joining
you.
us, and thanks for showing us a bit about Blasters of the Universe.
Anytime.
All right.